My name is Kathryn Morris, and I'm the Executive Director of RiverLink, and we are thrilled that you are with us today. We're going to be talking about our Forever option, which is what we call our conservation program. And it's part of our 30-year celebration. We are in our 30th year as an organization, which doesn't seem possible. I think we all started when we were preteen. And we wanted, as part of that, to sort of go back and look at some of the things we've done over those 30 years and bring people and ourselves sort of up to where we are today. And so this second program on conservation is one of, there's 10 more to come. So if you're looking at our website, you might be interested in seeing some of the other ones. The first one was about our beginnings, and we had 3 fantastic speakers who were with us in the very, very beginning of the organization, who talked about how difficult and how challenging it was to sort of even get people to think about the river 30 years ago. It was out of sight and out of mind. And think how far we've come. There's $100 million that have been appropriated for the right-of-way acquisition out here in the Wilmington Riverway, so big changes. We are really excited today, not only to have Amy Annino, who is our Watershed Resource and Conservation Manager, talk to you about our program, but to have 3 of the people, well actually 4, husband and wife, who have donated easements and worked with us in our conservation program. And I think their stories are fascinating about why they did it, how they did it, and what it meant to them, what an intergenerational discussion it was in many cases, and I think there's some lessons to be learned. So we're thrilled you're here, and we're recording this. I hope nobody has a problem with that. We're recording all of these programs, these salon programs, so they can be preserved and put on our webpage. So thank you. And Amy, do you want to start?
Sure. Do you get the lights here? Thank you. Well, welcome again, and thank you for being here today. So for those of you who don't know us, we are the voice of the river, and we'd like to invite you to join us in being the voice of the river yourselves. Our mission is to promote the environmental and economic well-being of the French Broad River and the watershed as a place to live, learn, work, and play. And our vision is to represent the past, present, and future voices of the French Broad River to ensure a vital, healthy watershed now and forever. And we do this in several ways. The first is through land conservation. We are an urban land trust with a focus on protecting water resources and improving quality of life. We work to improve water quality and water quantity through stream restoration projects, implementing best management practices for stormwater management, and conducting watershed restoration plans and studies. We work to expand education and community awareness about watershed health through our youth environmental education programs, and to adults through our Adopt a Stream and Adopt a Greenway program and our Name That Creek program, among others. We work to enhance recreation opportunities throughout the watershed, especially on the French Broad River, through our river access for improved boating access and fishing on the river, through our campsites to be a part of the French Broad River Paddle Trail, and through greenway development. We're also involved in sustainable economic development. It's a strong root of our organization. We preserve historic buildings for adaptive reuse to offer subsidized rent to artists and small businesses. Warehouse studios, where you are right now, is an example of that. Our staff is on the first level of the building, and up above we rent studios to artists. And our property at Pearson Bridge, down Riverside Drive, we rent to a local outfitter and also have a river access point to for river users and to help their business as well. And finally, implementing the Wilma-Dykeman Riverway Plan. This is a 17-mile greenway linking the French Broad River and the Annino River together. And it was developed by RiverLink and the community in 2004. It's been adopted by the city of Asheville and Buncombe County and is the #1 priority for implementation by the French Broad River Metropolitan Planning Organization. And RiverLink is represented in committees that were developed to implement the project, especially here in the River Arts District through the coming Transportation Improvement Project. So we're here to talk about our land conservation program, and as an urban land trust, we have a different set of criteria that we focus on than other land trusts in the region. Our first, of course, is to work on connecting land that's connecting land to currently protected properties, so that we grow and increase our protected properties in a strategic, thoughtful way. The second option is that, of course, we want to protect water resources. So we'd like for the property we work with to contain or be within 300 feet of water. Be less than 100 acres. With our urban focus, often our properties are smaller, and we like to be the organization that's trying to link these smaller parcels together throughout the city. We're also focusing on protecting steep slopes, and that prevents development on steep slopes is often a cause of erosion and sedimentation, which is a big issue on our watersheds. That's an important part of our land conservation criteria. We want to provide urban and suburban or rural green space through our land conservation program, and if possible, permit public access through parks and greenways. Now, all of these criteria don't have to be bundled up in one, but we prefer for them to contain at least one or two of these criteria. So some of you may not really be familiar with options for conservation, and there are several of them. The first is through a conservation easement, and a conservation easement is a voluntary written agreement between a landowner and RiverLink that's meant to restrict future development on your property for perpetuity. Now, the landowner remains the owner of the property, and RiverLink upholds the conservation easement through time. The second option is a bargain sale. You can sell your property to us, and a bargain sale is the sale of property below fair market value. And for conservation, that's usually what precedes. Another option is a purchase option, and this is where a land trust is given the right to buy a piece of property at a set price within a set amount of time. Another option is just a property donation, where this works really well if a landowner wants to make sure their land is protected, but doesn't have the means or interest to maintain and manage that property any longer. Another opportunity is through a life estate. And in a life estate, a landowner donates the property to RiverLink but continues to live on the property until they pass. And of course, a landowner is also able to leave property to RiverLink in their will as a bequest. There's several benefits for landowners who put their property into conservation. There are tax incentives. There's a federal tax deduction that can be equal to the fair market value of the gift. There's a state tax can be significantly reduced if there's a conservation easement on the property. And there's also peace of mind, just knowing that the land that you love is going to remain the way that you want it to forever. And to think about putting your property into conservation is a way to really leave an environmental legacy, to ensure that there's open space for future generations, there's habitat for future generations, and clean water. It goes a long way to protect your property. Now, RiverLink holds several responsibilities when we work with conservation by landowners. We are required to steward the property, and that entails us coming out to your property for what we call an annual monitoring visit, where we make sure that the terms of the conservation easement that were set in place are being upheld by the landowner. We are also required to defend the conservation easement legally if necessary, and work with current and future landowners of the conservation property for perpetuity. So it's not just a 10-year or 20-year requirement. This land trust is committed to stewarding the property forever. Although we're a young land trust, we only got started officially doing this in 2002, I think we've made a lot of accomplishments. And one of our early accomplishments was in 1994 with the acquisition of the French Broad River Park, and in 1999 with Carrier Park. Both were developed into parks and transferred to the city of Asheville to be part of the city's municipal park system. And Carrier Park today is the city's most widely visited park in the system. We also currently have protected 115 acres in 3 counties, in Buncombe County, Madison County, and Henderson County, on 19 separate conservation easements, and through acquiring 9 fee simple properties, and that just means we own the property. Now, some of our conservation projects have involved both stream restorations and implementing stormwater BMPs, and as a requirement from our funder, putting a conservation easement on those restored lands was part of the deal. So several of our easements are past stream restoration projects and stormwater BMP projects that have really done a lot to improve water quality throughout our region. Now, some of our goals for conservation: we hope to continue to protect and improve water resources, and that would include preventing more land from being developed, protecting source drinking water, working to protect and restore streams that are listed by the Department of Environmental Quality on their 303D list, which just means it's impaired for water quality. We hope to provide additional public access to the French Broad River, and include more campsites as part of our French Broad River paddle trail so that people can get out on the river and experience it for a multi-day trip if they like. We hope to continue to assist in implementing the Wilma-Dykeman Riverway Plan, working with city and county staff and other agencies and even private landowners in protecting land that can become part of this greenway system. And finally, we've been really working hard over the last 2 years to obtain national accreditation with the Land Trust Alliance, which is a national advocacy group that sort of sets the standards and procedures for best practices for land trusts across the country. And we should know by this time next week whether or not we have achieved accreditation with the Land Trust Alliance. So we're really excited to hear that news soon. And we ask that you help us reach these goals and be a participant in conservation, no matter how great or small. We have a lot of opportunities for volunteering as we take care and steward the properties that we have in conservation. We hope that you, as you learn about our program, will share this information with folks that you know who may have an interest in participating in our conservation programs. We have a land protection fund that goes towards acquiring and stewarding new properties. And if you have a property, we hope that you would perhaps consider placing a conservation easement on it or making a donation of that property. for conservation. And that sort of concludes my component of the talk. And we are lucky, as Karen mentioned earlier, to have several landowners here with us today who are going to just talk about why they wanted to protect their property. And I was going to have them move up to the front of the room. Let me turn off this terrible blinding light here. So if you guys would mind coming up, I'll grab one of the chairs.
I'll just tell you a little background. Ed's walking over here, and his wife Joy were the first people that ever gave us a piece of property. And it's on the French Broad River at Long Shoals Road, and their concern was overdevelopment around them, very much. And
those concerns have been confirmed.
right.
And to continue with what Karen just said, about 15 years ago, we, after we moved back to Asheville from Washington, D.C., we were involved in conservation programs on our family farms, not here, but in eastern North Carolina and Arkansas. And we had a tract of land on the French Broad River, just south of the French Broad River Bridge, Long Shoals Bridge it's called. And it was separated from the rest of our property by Ledbetter Road. And it was swampland. And so we said, well, what are we going to do with this? So through our interest in conservation programs with our family farms, we got involved in the thought about providing a conservation easement to a local organization or a nonprofit. And our problem 15 years ago was not a lot of people in this area 15 years ago were involved in conservation easements of any kind. And I happened to be on the Farmland Preservation Board for Buncombe County at the same time, which was just beginning its effort in farmland preservation. And so we decided, well, we need to find somebody who could help us out. So first we went to Julian Price's organization. He's now deceased, to determine if his organization could provide us any support in creating a conservation easement for some nonprofit. They couldn't, and they referred us to the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, which had just gotten started too. And so they redirected me to Karen Nolan, who had just gotten started also. And so Karen and I struggled with this in conversations for a couple of months, trying to find exactly how to do it. And at the same time, we were very fortunate. We had a significant windfall in money from a long-term class action suit. And we were in a hurry to get our income tax deductions and state tax credits. So through Karen's contacts in Raleigh, which was the North Carolina Resources, what's it called? The North Carolina...
I don't know what it's called now.
It's changed now. Also, the complexion of the organization has changed too.
Right. It was Diener at that time.
It was NR something.
Yeah, Department of Environment and Natural Resources.
They have to approve a conservation easement for you to be able to get both federal and state tax deductions and tax credits. So we worked for about 6 months to get this done, which included appraisals, surveys, and fortunately for us at the time, no baseline agreement was required, no baseline, which is like an appraisal, but it's a baseline that says this is what the property looks like that you want to conserve in perpetuity. And that's expensive to do. And since we were paying the bill, since ours was a donation, we were concerned about what it cost. So inevitably we got the appraisal done, and the appraisal in those days was the baseline, because the appraisal has a description of the property as it exists when you're making the easement, and it had color photographs of the property, so someone could see 10 years hence what changes had taken place. And ours was to be a forever wild, leave it just like it is. Swampland when it rains, full of all sorts of wild creatures, and there were paths for fishermen to walk on along the river, which have been there since the Indians were here. So, like my wife Joy remembers, before World War II, the gypsies used to had a campground down on this property on the river, which is, I'm sure, a nice place to be in the summertime. But it took about 6 months, I think, to finally get this, all this work done. And the property was transferred to RiverLink. Subsequent to that time, there have been no problems with the stewardship arrangements. But anybody who's driven down I-26 between Biltmore Square and the airport, or driven between Skyland and Brevard Road, knows there's a lot going on Longshore Road. And the problem we have today is, since it's forever wild, it means the public really doesn't have access to it, to use it on a, I suppose, really fully recreational basis, like putting in boats and camping out and this type of thing. That's prohibited, because it wasn't there before. And the easement states no structures can be erected. No significant improvements can be made to the property. You can leave a walking trail like it is, but you can't build revetments, you can't build bridges, you can't build steps up and down on this property. And with the incredible amount of traffic we're having in the summertime now with boaters, rafters, you go down to the French Broad River in the summertime and walk across the Longshore Bridge, and the river's covered with color. There's people on floats and boats and everything imaginable. Well, our property just south of the Longshore Bridge is a beautiful spot to stop and build a campfire and drink and leave all your trash. And you get back in your boat and you drift northward and you leave all your trash where you were. So that has become a real problem for us. And if you're in a more remote area, it wouldn't be a problem. But for us, in a high traffic area with lots of people, stewardship has become a problem to maintain it in a forever wild status. And occasionally you can't stop construction people. When the new bridge was being constructed several years ago across the river at Long Shoals, we went down there one weekend and there was this giant machine had gone and driven itself completely through the conservation easement to the bank of the river. Some giant machine. Well, what they were doing was they had to get this big machine to the river to put a line across the river so they could put big barges on the river to drive new pillars into the river bottom to put the new bridge on. Not knowing that they said, of course, quote unquote, we didn't know it was a conservation easement. So that had to be restored. And Karen Cragnola was very influential in getting the NCDOT and the contractor to restore the area that had been damaged by the intrusion. So that goes along with stewardship when you're in an area that's rapidly developing. And we laughed when we did this 15 years ago. We said, well, in 10 years, it'll be the last green thing left on Longshore Road. And I crossed my heart. It's about to come true. It's about to become true. Do any of you have any questions? Because what we did 15 years ago, I'm sure the ramifications of doing it today are going to be different. Because there's more bureaucracy involved. And there's a changing climate in terms of state benefits, North Carolina benefits. Because the climate in the state government has changed dramatically to be, I suppose, not as positive as it was 15 years ago toward preserving anything, historic homes or rivers or green space. The climate, it seems to be, the current political group doesn't want to invest any money in doing the right thing for the future. Anyway, that seems to be the climate. So your state tax credits for conservation easements for farmland and for green space and things like we have around here have disappeared. But the federal credits, the federal tax deductions still are very good. But the key to that, if you have income, you can deduct. If you don't have a lot of income, you can't deduct anything. The state was a tax credit, which is significant.
Let me just tell you a story about how one project leads to another. So Ed and Joy did this, and it was new for us, but something we actually realized was an incredible need in our watershed. And Joy had a neighbor who.
Oh, yes.
Long-term neighbor.
Long-term neighbor, they were kids together on the river, who owned the other.
She owns the east side,
of the river.
south
Sort
of
of
the
parallel
I-26 Long
to
Hills
this.
intersection.
They talked to them, people that own that, about what they did, and those folks said, you know, our land was cut off by the I-26 ramp. So we're gonna cut off that land and we're gonna give it to RiverLink. And so we do have complete public access and camping on the other side of the river,
In fact,
exactly.
you have a camping site there.
That's right, we have a campsite right across from there. So, you know, one kind deed, talk to with neighbors, talk to with friends, talk to in a neighborhood, and we're gonna talk about this happening with Bart and happening with Kathryn, leads to another. So it really does multiply itself, it's like yeast, it gets bigger.
But
It was a very big, significant turning point in this organization.
But unfortunately for today, the reality of today is I've been on the Buncombe County Farmland Preservation Board for about 25 years now. I've been nothing more than a historical memory on the board, but anyway, that's not relevant. But the lack of the tax credits for North Carolina has made a significant impact on people really wanting to donate farmland, for example, or put conservation easements on farmland in North Carolina. Even though sometimes it's not that significant in terms of how it would have helped them, somehow it seems to have slowed things down considerably in terms of people wanting to volunteer to do conservation programs, period, whether it be for land or buildings or houses or whatever it is. And that to me bothers me as someone who's pro-conservation minded. And if you think about that when you vote. Because what people have done with Kathryn Morris and her organization is something for the future of everybody, not just for a self-seeking, self-interested project for tax deductions. Do you have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is the conservation easement like any other donation to a nonprofit? Is it treated that way as far as tax?
No, you still, when you put a conservation easement on your property, you still own that property. So you're not necessarily donating the title of your land.
So if you do, then it is a donation to a nonprofit, but
It's an income tax that what you have lost in terms of dollar value is an income tax deduction to you in terms of the federal government.
But not at
And
the
that-
state level anymore.
Not at the state level, because they've decided that's not worthwhile anymore. Don't ask me why. But for the federal government, you also could prorate that deduction. Let's say your deduction is $250,000. You can deduct that over a 6-year period of time. The year that's of execution in 5 more years. So you can actually deduct for $30,000 or $40,000 a year for 5 or 6 years. Which means that if you have a windfall of income in any one year, that's the year you want to do your conservation easement.
And the deduction comes from, when you put an easement on your property, you're basically giving up your developable rights on that property, either for the whole thing or a part of that property that's in detail drawn out and described.
Also, that reduces your property taxes by a like amount. If the value of your property has been depreciated because you've lost the ability to sell it at market value, which would be someone can build on it, you've lost that. Your property taxes are going to go down the same amount. Well, the tax assessor is supposed to do that. Sometimes you have to fight for it.
You have to fight for it.
No.
A question, if I gather that as part of the contract for the easement is the RiverLink agrees to steward the property, and what does that mean?
The stewardship,
And if the
you're
stewardship
required,
doesn't happen,
you're required,
can you get your?
you're required in order,
reverse it?
you're required in order to meet the federal and state income tax or tax credits or deductions. You're required to provide RiverLink a portion of fees to make sure they can monitor your project in perpetuity. In our case, we donated, I think, $5,000 to RiverLink to establish a fund for them to ensure the monitoring of the stewardship of the program forevermore.
And
I
if
don't
that
remember the
doesn't
exact
happen,
amount.
can you reverse it and get your easement back?
You
No.
can't reverse it.
Okay.
What you're doing is you're giving a title. You actually, there's a title involved, there are deeds involved. The conservation easement is a deed, and you're
Yes.
deeding to RiverLink the development rights for your property forevermore.
And
It
so-
can't be reversed.
Okay, and it's based on a certain expectations from RiverLink? Is RiverLink always tied into?
Well, I'll give you an example, this RiverLink, when we had all of the boaters, or whatever, the recreation people in the river, I called Kathryn Morris first, and I said, hey, you gotta do something, we're covered over with people down there, they're building campfires on the property, they're having picnics and parties and leaving, and they get in the boats and sail away the next day, and leave us all this trash down here. I mean, lots of it too.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it being quite a burden.
So
on
we,
whoever-
with her help and with our pressure, we got NCDOT involved. Because actually it was creating a hazard on the road that abuts that property. People were parking on the sides of the road and it was dangerous. So they promised to put up no trespassing signs and a partial railing and everything to keep people from doing that. Because it doesn't do any good to put up fences. I mean, we posted the property with appropriate signs and everything. We even put up some fences, but you can put up all the fences you want to, but people want to put the boat in the river, they're gonna get the boat in the river. And they'll tear the fence down at night, or bring their pickup trucks there at nighttime, and put chains on your fences and tear them out of the ground, and the next day there's no fence there. You can't stop people from doing things like that. You can't guard the property 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. So it's a struggle if you're in an emerging area that's developing rapidly, but not negatively, but a lot of the development is positive. The river usage is positive. It's nice to see people enjoying the river. If the river's clean enough to boat on, I'm not sure I'd swim on it, but boat on it. But and that's positive. But the negative side is if they're trashing everything, and people do trash everything.
Yes.
Look at I-26.
Looking at a hell of a day.
So,
Trash every day.
but once you do that, that's forever. It has nothing to do with my son, or our son, or his family. We've given that right away to RiverLink. It can't be withdrawn. If we did, the IRS would come after us too, so.
And your $5,000 that you donated, you don't do that every year, that's just a one-time thing, or?
That's a one-time arrangement, yeah.
And that's a figure that's determined by the size of your property.
That's right, the
There's
value
a
of
lot
the
of
property.
factors that determine what that fee is for. It's for stewardship and also for legal defense. Because we're required to defend in a court of law, if necessary, the conservation easement itself.
And you provide volunteers to do the stewardship? If
Well, the stewardship really entails an annual monitoring visit where RiverLink staff or accompanied maybe by a volunteer come to visit the property, and for example, we may walk the boundary lines to make sure there's no encroachment occurring from a neighboring landowner. We walk through the interior of the property to make sure that basically that everything that should be happening is happening, and any rights that were relinquished with the easement are not happening on the property.
I'll give you an example of an interesting intrusion. A couple of years ago, there's another nonprofit organization that has to do, and I'm not sure what its name is, to do with boating and camping on the river. And they put out a map, a publication that shows the legitimate spots for you to stop and camp and when you're taking a trip from Brevard up to Hot Springs, I suppose, on your boat. Well, they put our site on their map as a legal spot. Well, we didn't know that. Nobody asked us. It just appeared on this map that's given to people who hike and camp and boat. So when you go down and you see somebody on the river, camping on the river, building a fire and having hot dogs and beer, and what are you doing here? Oh, well, you're on the map. Oh, well, we know we're on the map now. So we had to get off the map. So I turned to RiverLink and I said, well, get them off the map.
We did not print, obviously print that map.
But that's the kind of intrusion that's RiverLink's responsibility.
Right.
Yeah,
It's to
development
protect-
you didn't even know was coming.
Right.
So,
The other thing that we've tried to do down there, because he's gonna continue to have, we're gonna continue to have issues down there, is to make that one of our adopt a stream sites, so that we have people that go at least twice a year to do cleanups down there that are volunteers, and we have a sign up there.
And a
And
bit-
we, it's constant, because it is a very desirable location.
And you have intrusions by the government into a conservation easement. I'll give you an example on this property also, because they wanted to build a new bridge across the French Broad River, and they wanted to build a bigger bridge across the French Broad River. So they wanted more land to build a bigger bridge on. So they came to us and they took some land away from us. We own the land. They took the land away from us, on right of eminent domain, and they negotiated with us. But we have to share with RiverLink the proceeds. Since 87% of the value of that piece of property was determined to be lost as a product of the conservation easement. Yet we sold land to the state of North Carolina to build a bigger bridge on. We had to. But also, the state of North Carolina, the North Carolina statute says, if you're condemning land for an eminent domain for a public project like a bridge or a highway or whatever it may be, you're required to have a public meeting. You can't just do it. Now, the state had to come to us and get a waiver from the public meeting, because we saw no way to avoid what they were doing, obviously. And so we negotiated a settlement, and we gave RiverLink 87% of the settlement, because that belonged to RiverLink, not to us. We'd given that away. So these things keep happening year after year that you never foresaw when you got started in 1981.
Do you recall how many acres you were talking?
Our piece of property was 3.3 acres.
Okay.
It was a 3.3 acre tract that was separate from the remaining 30 acre tract, which was on Long Shoals and Ledbetter Roads. It was separated by Ledbetter Road from us, south of the bridge. So it was a very small piece.
Narrow, kind of narrow?
Oh, it's shaped like a triangle.
Oh, okay.
The base of the triangle at the bridge and to a point south of the bridge. And it's wetlands, I'd say, most of the year.
I do have one other question about Forever Wild. This is probably more for RiverLink. When I think of walking away from a piece of property like that, I think invasives. Is part of your stewardship to manage the vegetation on it, or does it just
We
go
make-
to
We make an
whatever
effort to
for the-
do that as much as we can, based on what the property owner is, has suggested to us. And Kathryn can talk about that with the piece of property that she did.
We don't make any effort to keep off people who are fishing. People go to the bridge and walk down under the bridge, and they can walk under the bridge and get on the property, and historically, there was always a trail along the bank there. And when the Indians were here, they had fish traps out of the river, because that's where the river is very shallow, at Long Shoals. And we wanted to stay like that. We don't have any objection to fishermen fishing off the property. We just object to the trash. We object to the trash. It's not the fishermen that leave the trash. It's not the guys who come out with Orvis here on Orvis and go down and fish on the river, fly fishing. They're not the trash makers.
Yeah, no, I was referring to plants.
Oh,
To
plants.
invasive species of plants and how
There's lots of
difficult
that
they are
down
to
there.
control.
So I can
Lots
talk a
of
little
that.
bit about that. We're not necessarily mandated to remove invasive species from the property that's under conservation. We often will suggest that to the conservation landowner and do what we can to assist them with that, but it's not our responsibility to do so.
Do the conservation easements last for the lifetime of the landowner, or is it the lifetime?
No,
The
they
perpetuity
last.
is forever.
Okay.
It's a deed recorded at the county courthouse that says RiverLink, and the conservation easement deeds run 25, 35 pages long. They're very complicated, very complex. It's a very specialized legal process. I think There are two people here in Asheville who do them. I know the guy,
Greg Hutchins does them.
the guy was the Stevens, and also this, the other lady who does them. She did ours.
Yeah,
And Cox.
Yeah.
Cox.
yeah.
And
And every easement's different. I mean,
Right.
I think that's really important to understand.
you as a landowner, you construct the easements. You sit down with the attorney, your attorney, and they will counsel you, and they obviously, all of them, they have a format that meets the state law and the federal law, and you can build into it exactly what you want. If you want to leave RiverLink, for example, the ability to build a platform and steps for boat ramps and stuff like that, that's fine. That's your choice. In our case, back in 1981 and 82, we hadn't even thought that far. We just said, well, we want it to be just like it is today. And then to be used like it was then. In fact, RiverLink came to us a couple of years ago, I forgot who was the person involved, and wanted to make improvements. Build steps down from the road down to the bank for people to have easy access to the river, and make improvements to the path along the edge of a river that runs up from the bridge down to the point. And we said, no, we don't want to do that because it's not the idea we had. We don't want you to make any improvements. The more improvements you have today, of course, and that's turned out to be a good idea, the more improvements we would have made today, the more accessible it would have been. And then the problem we have today would be even greater. We don't want it to be accessible. And in the meantime, the state came along, and when they built a new bridge, and built us a beautiful fence with barbed wire on top of it that cuts off the bridge easement area from the conservation easement. It runs down Ledbetter Road 150 to 200 feet. So the state did us a favor in that case by protecting the easement when they were protecting the road and the bridge. Nothing's ever static south of Asheville. And nothing is ever the same.
Thank you, Ed.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Does anyone have any further questions for him?
Let me tell you that, so Ed gave us this land. The people that they knew growing up across the river exactly from them gave us their land, where it's completely open and it's for camping and fishing, and you have to boat into it. You can't get there any other way. And we were on TV one morning, like on the 5 o'clock a.m. news, talking about this project. And Mr. Strepper happened to be watching the news.
Foolish enough to get up that early.
Right. You know how one thing leads to another. So Mr. Strepper is watching the news, and he thinks, gosh, that's a pretty good idea. And I live on a street that, at that time, I don't even think was paved.
Yeah, it was.
Was it? Okay, it had just been paved.
We're not that antiquated.
And where Azalea Road, the soccer fields are, and lots of blind spots on the road, lots of erosion, lots of traffic now because of the soccer fields. And so, you wanted to tell your story a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
You sent me an email.
Yeah. So we, three other families got together. I corralled them and talked them into donating both sides. We own both sides of the river. There's not much land there. But I think you said, what, almost 5 acres?
Mhm.
That we,
Between all of it.
So I'm too poor to pay taxes, so I don't get any kind of benefit from that. I just wanted to make sure that there was an easement. And basically, our land is both sides, just narrow strips. And it's for the greenway.
Eventually.
Yeah, eventually, I'll be dead by then.
We might all be dead.
I just turned 76, I don't think I'll see it.
Where is the land?
It's on Azalea Road,
Okay.
and it's 1/4 of a mile from Tunnel Road. It runs from Tunnel Road to Swananoa River Road, and we're about a mile from the soccer fields. And
Really close to the Blue Ridge Parkway.
yeah,
as it crosses
we're just
over.
we're just above the Parkway Bridge, and so that land will be preserved forever, and eventually they will build a greenway. We've had some problems, but not because of RiverLink, but the city carved out years ago huge turnouts on our property. So of course, everybody goes in there and parks, they go down to my little beach down there and they party. So I said, you know, you guys created these turnouts, so we're gonna put a stop to that. You're gonna put up no parking signs and buffers. So since then, herons have returned, turtles are sunning on rocks, because, you know, the fishermen I don't keep out, but the swimmers are unbelievable. They just go in there, I don't know what the hell.
Especially the naked ones.
Yeah. And the one prostitute we had down there. Who was going down to the veterans, where the veterans are, and pulling them over there. And I said, what the hell's going on here? She's got a different guy in the car every time. Finally she gets out. My granddaughter saw her naked in the pickup truck. Just scarred from life from grandma. Just joking. But they do a pretty good job twice a year coming in and picking up all the trash in the property. The trash is unbelievable. It's like you were speaking.
It is unbelievable.
Yeah. The fishermen are the only ones that don't object to it, but they leave a lot of those little blue cans around like, that you could, you know, where you buy the dead bait, but that's not a big deal. Other than that, they're pretty good. So.
Well, and their neighbors, one of the neighbors owned a property that he wanted to give to us in fee simple. So
Right.
we have 4 easements on one parcel in fee simple, and he, all contiguous. And his reasoning was that he was not well, and the road is going to need lots of improvements whenever the city and the DOT get around to doing
Never.
it. And he wanted to make sure there was somebody at the table negotiating in the best interest of the neighborhood and the river. And so he deeded that parcel to us, so that whenever that does happen, that, you know, we'll be at the table sort of arguing for, you know, a clean, safe river and a clean, safe road that doesn't have this blind spot. It's pretty scary when I go there to come around and you don't really know what's coming the other way. So it's different reasons for different people.
I think Lee Towery donated 4 acres, maybe a little more, and it's all covered in, what do you call it, it's not
It's
bamboo,
river cane.
it's river
cane,
cane, yeah,
right.
river cane, so we got plenty of that there, so it makes it almost, no one can get through it. You risk your life to go through that. But we have lots of bears that come, get up on my deck, they roam the river, they wallow, you know, they dig up the insects out of the logs, and so there's a lot of wildlife down there. Of course, they come probably from the parkway. And then across from us, Billy Graham's Cove is right there, those mountains there, that's all Billy Graham's land. There's lots of wildlife there. But of course, if you go near the fence, all alarms go off. You can't really go on there. But it's really pretty property, but that's all I have to say.
Let me speak for the Farmland Advisory Board while you're up, because it reminds me, if you have more than 20 acres of woodland, and even if you have your home layout on the property, you can put your land in forestry. Make it a certified, you know, forestry as a form of agriculture, silviculture. And you can get a, what's called present use value. You can have your property valued as agricultural property rather than property at market value. For example, our remaining tract on Longshore's Road is 30 acres. Well, 27 of that 30 acres is in a certified tree farm. So it has reduced our taxes by about 80% for that 27 acres. That's a form of conservation, really, because then once you get that into a certified tree farm and it's in agriculture, you can go into another farming program called VAD, Voluntary Agricultural District. You can become part of VAD in Buncombe County, and that gives you other protections from your neighbors if they complain if your cows smell too bad. So there are all kinds of things related to conservation that go along with you know, donating or conservation that just not on an easement basis. Present use value is very important if you have more than 20 acres and it's forest land. And you can have your house. We have 2 houses, one for us, one for our son. And each house is on 1.5 acres. That's taxed at market value. The rest of the 27 acres is taxed as agricultural land.
But that does not prevent you from cutting some trees if you want to.
Well, you're required, every 5 years we have to do we have to have a forestry management plan
Okay.
first, before you can get what's called present use value, which would be agricultural. And once you get that, you have to be able to show the tax assessor once every 5 years that you've actually accomplished your forestry management plan by harvesting timber for sale, not just for fiber, but for sale. So we have, next year's our year. We have to have somebody come in and selectively cut maybe 10 or 15 big old oak trees, big trees. They should be cut anyway, because those big oak trees are simply destroying the rest of the forest. They've gotten so big. So there are all kinds of ways. We could not live on Long Shoals Road today with 33 acres unless we had a conservation easement with RiverLink on 3 acres of the river. 1 acre of that 3 acres of the river was technically buildable, even though it was in floodplain, which makes it very desirable for market value. And across the road from us today, we have the Aventine Apartments with 362 apartments and Sunshine Chevrolet. And the computer in the courthouse doesn't make any difference because we're on the south side of the road and they're on the north. It's all taxed at the same rate. We're considered industrial, commercial in terms of market value. We couldn't afford to live where we live today if I hadn't had a conservation easement with RiverLink and I didn't have 27 acres in agriculture. No way. Sir?
Well, this may be a question more for RiverLink, but it picks up on what you were just saying. How much does RiverLink promote this idea of conservation within the, particularly Buncombe County, but as you mentioned, you have easements in 3 counties. But how much do you promote that so that people who live, particularly along the river courses, as they think about developing, or if they want to not develop, like you, sir, they know to come to you. And the example I'm thinking of is the Coggins Farm. The developer buys it, developing housing. It's gone through a lot of different changes, but he's on the river. And if that developer had perhaps known that if he gave, he could have captured some a tax benefit by doing a conservation easement along the Swanano River. My question is, how good are you at promoting this?
We do as much as we can. I mean, we really do. When there's a huge project like, what was the 7 thing that went belly up and had 7 Falls in Henderson County, we spent a ton of time with that developer trying to talk to him about, you're on both sides of the river here for a lot of miles. And so we do what we can. We have really one person doing it. And
how did that turn out?
I helped
with 7 Falls.
Well, they're in bankruptcy and that never happened, and
the developer's in prison.
And the developer's in prison. I mean,
I think they resold the land though.
There with him.
right. So we do what we can, talking about a developer though, that's a very good point, and that goes really to our next speaker as part of a whole strategy that we've been working. Kathryn Morris, we met a long time ago when there was a proposed development over in West Asheville. Some of you may remember it. It was called Falconhurst, and that neighborhood. And there was a neighborhood that was very upset about doing that. We met at that time, and we stayed in good contact. And Kathryn lives in that neighborhood, and when she retired, said, "I really want to make sure that there's not a lot of development around where I live, and that property that was saved, that 8 acres, can grow. That there can be more additions to that." And so she donated to us a property that will be forever protected. And we went from that to talking to a developer who had bought a piece of property in that little sub-watershed. And we now have funding and a commitment from him to give us an easement to do some stream and stormwater management along the stream and part of his development. So it grows and it multiplies on itself. Do we catch everything? No. We hope to build this part of our program and have more people on staff helping to do this. And we have spent the last 2 years really refining all our internal processes so that we will be accredited, and we should know next week if that's come through. And you know, it's a process. You know, as Ed says, 15 years ago, people weren't even doing it. Certainly, right now, there's not many or any land trusts that we know that are doing small pieces. So we're filling a niche that we feel very much needs to be filled. And Kathryn, do you want to talk a little bit? Oh.
Don't you have something in Kenilworth along the Swannoa there?
Yes.
Some sloping?
Yep, we have other properties that we own that were going to be developed. If you may remember, if you were here just a few years ago, there was a lot of brouhaha in the Kenilworth neighborhood about a piece of property on a steep slope that was zoned for 150 units. And the developer went out to get all the drawings, engineered drawings, architectural drawings, spent a couple $100,000 on those because it was zoned that way. He went to the city to get it approved, and the neighborhood showed up and said, we don't want that there. 3.35 acres, 150 units on a steep slope. Well, there was lawsuits back and forth. We talked to the developer, and we got him to donate that land to us. So that will never be developed, and we own that in fee simple. So, do we get them all? No, I wish I could tell you we got them all, Robbie, we don't. But we're building our capacity and our professionalism to get more of them.
There are a lot of groups that work with similar things as you're doing, and I'm with a group, Friends of Connect Buncombe, working with more or less greenways within the county. But the DOT sets aside road improvements for the future. Right away.
Right.
They don't purchase it today, but they say, we think we may need this.
Right.
And the planning departments are aware of that, and if you propose something on that, they say, hold up now, maybe there's a problem here.
Yeah.
We're trying to get them to understand that since the Greenway plan for the Buncombe County has been approved by County NC,
Right.
that the planning departments become a little more aware of that and just make a point of it
Right.
with developing of property that this is here, maybe you
Well,
don't
and
think
a
about it.
big part of what we've been doing the last couple of years is educating local government about what is a conservation easement, because they don't like them. They don't understand them, and they don't like them. What do you mean? If I own that piece of property, I can't do exactly what I want, when I want, whenever I want, whenever I get the money? No, they're all of a sudden that property has some limitations on it. Local government didn't like that. So, a big part of this is moving a lot of pieces together forward.
Thank you to all of our speakers who took time out of their day to talk with us and share their stories about land conservation. And thank you to all of you for coming out. Does anyone have any final questions?
I'm thinking of this idea of stewardship. As I understand it, at the Beaver Dam Lake, the Lakeshore Homeowner Association, which owns that property, owns the lake, they had originally always intended for an easement to go all the way around the lake. And in the 70s, I think it was, there was a house that was built on the west side of the lake that took possession, you might say, to the lakeshore. And when that property came up for sale recently, the Lakeshore Homeowner Association took it to court to say, no, this is our easement. We want to maintain this easement. And the new home buyer spent $30,000 to $40,000 to pursue this in court, lost. So I don't know whether it's a serviceable trail today, but I've always wanted to be able to walk all the way around that lake, and you will be able to do so. That's part of the whole stewardship, because the homeowner association had to go to court to prove their easement.
Absolutely.
Well, I remember back 15 years ago, when we first talked with Karen, that her idea then 15 years ago was to have a bicycle walking path on the west side of the French Broad River, all the way from the airport to Asheville. Wow. Well, what we've seen in 15 years, thanks to her and her efforts with RiverLink, we are beginning to see some of that come to pass. But maybe someday there will be a bicycle walking path all the way from the airport to the city of Asheville. It's happening slowly, piece by piece.
That's great. Yeah, we have a friend who lives in Canada, and she's able to ride her bicycle, you know, up Adboy Road and through some park up there, Omni Creek Park, and she goes all the way to her house sometimes.
But south of Asheville, there's an obstacle called the Biltmore Estate. And I can tell you, they don't give anything away.
Well, I hope what you've taken away from today is that these agreements are individualized. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And there's a lot of discussion that goes back and forth with the family. And it's often not just the current landowner or the current generation, it's multi-generational. Because it impacts your will and what you would leave for your children and grandchildren. So there's a lot of discussion that goes on, but I hope that if you take one thing away from this, it's that one size does not fit all when it comes to easements.
Any opportunity for repair and buffer easements?
That's one of our priority areas, and we do a lot of that.
100-foot
Repairing.
buffer, yeah, just a 100-foot buffer.
Right.
It's definitely something we hope to do, but again, it really depends on landowner willingness and interest to want to work with us and do that.
I mean, it's a voluntary program.
Amy?
Jerry, there are lots of different variations of the state law today that weren't in existence 15 years ago for conservation easements. There's wildlife conservation easements. For example, over in the Canton area, over toward Waynesville, there's a wildlife conservation easement for a rattlesnake cliff. Behind, on one landowner's property, there's a cliff that historically has been rattlesnake heaven. He has that particular cliff, which is about 10, 11 acres, in a wildlife conservation easement with the state of North Carolina, which pays him good money
So that's,
every year. So I'm just saying, there are all types of variations of conservation easements.
what are the incentives for people who have farmland, like to encourage folks to do easements along their creeks that go through their land? Because then there's a fence and then there's gonna be 30 feet outside of the stream restoration. But is there tax incentive or cash incentives?
There's a cost-sharing agreement usually between the state and the county and the landowner, which provides a pretty good incentive. For example, take forestry, for example, which I'm familiar with, because we're involved with that in both two places in North Carolina and one in Arkansas. The forestry incentive, the state will provide you 75% of the cost of reforestation on a reimbursement basis.
What about for cattle though?
There are some programs, cost share programs to help landowners install fencing and watering systems to keep cattle.
You would need to
creeks.
contact Gary Higgins at the Buncombe County Soil and Water
We
Conservation.
have it on our land. I'm just like trying to encourage neighbors to do the
Okay.
same.
Okay.
So we've got the fencing, we've got the
Yeah,
watering,
okay.
but how, there's so much impact on farmland to stream quality, and how do you encourage people to give up that amount of land, you know, because it's the right thing to do for everybody downstream, but they're losing acreage to usage, so is there cash incentives to?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the North Carolina Water Trust Fund does that type of thing, Karen. Aren't you on the board for that?
I was for 15 years, but I have been removed.
Oh, I know why.
Yeah.
It's politics.
It's politics, right. Yeah, I mean, there were more funds to do that in the past. I believe there are more funds that will be in the future. And I think that if you were to talk to any scientist or water quality person, they would tell you that is the best thing that you could do is provide a buffer area for all the water to slow down before it goes into the river, a vegetated swale, something just to slow down the water. So it's cyclical, and we're sort of in a down right now.
There are some families in Buncombe County, I know John Eagers, the Clarks were involved, and
Right.
they got a significant amount of money from the Water Trust Fund to
We,
do the land over in Tuskegee.
right.
So there are programs, the state programs, that do provide you compensation
We used to get $100 million a year to
A lot of
the
money.
Water Trust Fund, and
to do that.
last year was 11 million.
This is another one of these governments, this whole government by stealth, you know,
All state.
you have to know somebody to
Yeah,
participate.
since, dude, I just think that, if I could encourage neighbors and people in farming that I know are in, degraded areas, you know, because of cattle, but what can I use,
Well, I know what
what
you do.
tools?
Let's do a program up at the Marshall Town Hall and invite everybody in Madison County to, we could GIS identify them through some mapping, to come to a program, and we could talk about, I think people have to hear from people who have done it.
Right.
Yes,
Because I think there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding
Well,
about
I'm
what
thinking-
am I giving up here? What am I getting?
Not only giving up, but what's it gonna cost me? Like
Right.
the extra $5,000 for
Right.
the stewardship, it's like, those of us who farm, there's just not extra cash like that to do.
Right.
So,
Soil and water conservation districts, each county has one, and so they have money that's given to them from the state to help farmers in particular, better steward their property. So I don't know how much money each county, soil and water conservation district gets, but they're really, for agriculture related stream projects, they're really a good resource to go to find out what they can help with.
the cost share is awesome for folks who are already wanting that to happen, already wanting, understand the water quality issues. So the cost share is great. I mean, you get the fencing, you get the water tanks, but how do you convince people who are already minded that way? And if there's any cost involved at all, they're not gonna do it.
Right.
Give up land and it's gonna cost them
well, they're not gonna
something.
do it, probably they probably don't have the money to do it with.
Right,
That's the problem.
One of the
Right.
things that we're doing, and we have a little bit of money set aside, is creating just a fund. So that when opportunities come up, we actually would have the funds to respond to them. 'Cause a lot of times these opportunities are, immediate. You have 30 days, you have 60 days, you have 40 days, but we're just starting that fund now so that you could respond to these kinds of opportunities.
I actually work with the Madison Soil and Water District, so I might be able
Oh.
to say something
How convenient.
about how those work.
You're with
and
whom?
I'm with Madison Soil and Water,
Madison?
Soil and Water Conservation District,
Okay.
the cost share program.
Okay.
And, you're right, like, that's a missing component that we don't have, and we never wanted to be a handout organization. We feel like the farmer does need to have a little skin in the game, because when we've done 100% cost share programs, they don't take care of them, they don't appreciate it. But they can make up the rest of their cost share with saving on, because it's based on an average cost. So they may not have any actual cash money, but if they did the work themselves, they can come out ahead. As far as fighting with them about how much land they're losing between the side of the creek and the river, we have a few tricks up our sleeve, whether they bite or not. There's some hoof diseases that animals get by wading in mud, and so we have some research we could show them to say, hey, maybe you don't have to spend $1,300 to have a vet come and fix this hoof disease if you do this. Because you can look at it economically. Trying to fight with a lot of farmers about the water quality, only some of them will fight onto that. But if you can get to the bottom line of their land, something they come to us a lot is they didn't want to do this 20 years ago, but now when their stream was right here, now it's here. They've lost this much land and that was worth X amount of dollars. So let's go ahead and put that fence up now. The other talking point we have is that this might not be legal for them to do in 5, 10, 15 years.
I wondered about that.
And at that point, are the cost share programs gonna be able to help farmers pay to fix what's illegal? Maybe not. So if you can get while the getting's good, and we get about $100,000 a year to spend in Madison, and that goes a long way for the type of agriculture we have there.
Right.
Plus, we are always looking for additional grants, so we have a priority watershed that gives us another $200,000 to spend, that allows us more flexibility with the kinds of practices we put on the ground.
Great. Well, thank you for offering up that information. It's helpful. Any other questions?
Sorry.
No.
That's all right.
One of the things I take away from this is how important it is if we could communicate better with developers. Are there examples of developments, whether they're commercial or residential, that have chosen to do a greenway along their part of the water? And what, have you dealt with them, or you said you were working more with smaller parcels, but are you aware of some of those?
That's a very good point, Karen, because when I watched them build the Aventine apartments on north of the Longshore Bridge, they built retaining walls in the French Broad River that got to be 65 to 85 feet tall. And I don't think it's any land that's the bottom of those walls for anybody to walk on.
Well, there is actually, I walked on it,
You could walk that.
it would be beautiful.
How wide is it?
From that wall to the river is 100 yards,
Oh, 100 yards?
at least.
That much, okay.
Yeah, there's a point, where there's a rock, face
It
that comes
comes
down
out.
and chokes it off at the north end of that development.
Okay.
But, some creativity would get around that. But, in front of that wall, there's a lot of beaver activity. There's some drainage ditches that were done
Well,
way
that-
back when from the
That
Biltmore
same
estate.
company has tried
It's
to
beautiful
buy us,
land.
that same company has tried to buy us out this past year. And it's a good point, that's a good point you made, because you could actually put in your contract, you as a landowner could put in your sales contract a proviso that says the developer has to leave along the river X amounts of land, an easement with, if not RiverLink, with Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy or anybody, or Buncombe County, for example. Buncombe County has conserved nearly 13,000 acres of family farmland up in Sandy Mush in the past 10 years, a combination of Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, Buncombe County, the Conservation Trust of North Carolina, have preserved up in the northwest part of this county about 13,000 acres of what's beautiful, extraordinary, beautiful rural farmland that looks like something that existed in 1925. I don't mean, I'm not saying it looks bad, it looks good, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It's the view.
But that's been preserved for everybody to go up and look at.
But it's the view from the Grove Park Inn, basically. When you're sitting on the Grove Park Inn, on the porch there, that's what you're looking out on. And that'll be like that
And so
forever.
there is hope for conservation. I've seen in Buncombe County in the past 15 years, since 1980, when we got involved with Karen, I've seen where I was on the farmland advisory board for 8 or 9 years. We didn't accomplish one single conservation easement in 7 or 8 years. But all of a sudden, about 8 years ago, it all opened up, one after the other. When people up in Sandy Mush, the farmers, historical farmers, 4 or 5 generations of farming, same families, same land, began to understand that if it was going to stay that way, they could profit from it now by doing a donation or partial donation or a bargain sale, as you mentioned, with the county, Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, or with CTNC in Raleigh, and get a significant windfall of money to help them live more comfortably today, to yet preserve their farmland as agricultural land forevermore. So by selling their development rights on their farmland, they've preserved a beautiful spot for residents of Buncombe County and preserved agriculture forevermore.
Buncombe County is actually the only county that I know of the 100 that has a conservation fund like this. And I'm on the conservation board, you're on the farmland.
I'm on the farmland
I'm on
conservation
the,
board, you're on the other board.
and,
Her board concentrates on green space primarily.
Right.
We take care of family farmland. That's what we're looking for. In fact, we're involved in completing 2 conservation easements in the next 2 months over in the Black Mountain area, which is also going through a big developmental push. we're trying to save 40 and 50 acre tracts, smaller tracts, that are threatened by development over near Black Mountain.
But Buncombe County Commissioners have been really good
Well,
about putting money into it.
the ones that support preservation and conservation
Right.
have been, yes.
Yeah. We'll be getting an appropriation every year, so.
There's a
We hope that
tremendous,
continues.
there's a tremendous resistance in the conservative element of politics against using public funds for preservation and conservation. There's a resistance to that. Well, we have an example last month where we gave to the county commissioners a conservation easement on 113 acres up in Sandy Marsh. And 95% of the funding for that conservation easement, that was a partial donation, partial bargain sale. 95% of that, which was a $600,000 conservation easement, 95% of the funding came from private sources, not public sources, not Buncombe County money, not state money, not federal money, came from willing donators. The county was asked to provide 4% of the cost of that conservation easement, which was about $34,000, if I remember correctly. We had 4 county commissioners vote to give the money to pay for the appraisal, the surveys, the legal work for this easement. We had 4 commissioners that voted for it, 3 that voted against it, 3 conservatives voted against it, the 4 non-conservatives voted for it. But here you have a public body, county commissioners, who were asked to provide 4% of a conservation easement. The rest of it was non-public funded. And it was nearly defeated. The public's portion of the easement was so teeny tiny. But yet you have people who are in government who just innately resist because of their personal policies, I suppose. The idea that we should preserve or conserve anything. So, there you go, politics.
Well, we don't have any further questions.
Now,
Anybody
I
want
think
to-
I've done my policy.